Even if you have contrary views, you would definitely pay very close attention, to what the wisest man who ever lived had to say about this life. And this is what they had to say, and I quote, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow." In other words, bila kizungu mingi, the less you know, the happier you'll be in this life. These are, of course, the words of King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, captured in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 18. The same chapter where this man talks about examining life and getting a lot of knowledge and coming to the conclusion that it is all vanity, chasing after wind. On today's show, we shall focus on the very shocking revelations about the early life of a man called David Murathe. And we shall use these revelations, this story about Murathe, from an excellent piece in today's Sunday Nation, written by one of my all-time favorite journalists, Kamau Ngodho, to highlight the long list of Kenyans who have started out fighting for a better Kenya, sacrificing for a better tomorrow, only to end up leaving a legacy that is the complete opposite of how they started out. And we shall make a brave attempt to answer the very complex question: why? Why does this happen, even to the very best? Now, there was an attempted coup in Kenya on August 1st, 1982. And the truth is, to date, we still know very little about that coup attempt. Now, according to the piece in today's Sunday Nation, David Murathe had prior knowledge that that coup was going to happen before it happened. He was a University of Nairobi student then. And so when his colleagues were released, he stayed in jail. You know, there's a difference between excited students who join something in the heat of the moment without really understanding it, and those who had prior knowledge of the plot. And so what will come as a shock to many Kenyans is that David Murathe was not only a radical in those days, fighting for a radically different Kenya than what we had then, but he also used his very powerful connections to help a comrade whom he shared a cell with to secure a job with the Nation Media Group at a time when that organization had been warned by the government not to employ any radical characters. And of course, in those days, when the government warned you, it was an order. It was not a warning where you had an option of ignoring it. No way. And I'm going to answer a question that many who will have read this piece will be asking themselves. How could a radical student at the University of Nairobi have such powerful contacts everywhere? How? The answer is simple. David Murathe's dad was one of the very first black Africans after independence to become a multi-millionaire. Doing business, where Africans had not previously done business, along what we know today as Biashara Street. When you become so rich in a young nation, naturally, you'll also be extremely powerful. with their tentacles touching virtually everywhere. And it is easy to imagine, a young Murathe, very different in his thinking, when compared to his colleagues. I had a super fascinating discussion with my wife very recently, I believe this week, about the difference in character between those who are brought up surrounded by wealth and those who are brought up in poverty. They can never think the same. While his colleagues must have been thinking about establishing themselves in life and making a lot of money, Murathe would have had very little interest in money or making money. And therefore it is easy to see why he would have become so idealistic at a time when most Kenyans just wanted to stay out of trouble. You see, my friends, we do not choose where we're going to be born, but it has a huge impact for the rest of our lives. And we cannot change or even escape from it. The one who was brought up in poverty will be forever chasing after money and more money. There'll never be enough money. The nightmare that will cause them to wake up sweating and terrified is the very thought of returning to poverty. A rich man's kid who has always been brought up in comfort will have no such nightmares. Indeed, they will have very little idea of what poverty really is. And so there you are. David Murathe turned from an idealistic, principled, freedom fighter to what he is today. A man who was bang in the middle, or at least had a lot of knowledge of what really happened during the 2017 presidential elections. A man who had no qualms then insulting a gallant Kenyan like Raila Odinga then. Why? Oh, why? And how do people change? I know most of us will appreciate why this is such an important question for Kenyans to answer, or at least to attempt to find an answer right now. Because all of us, in fact more Kenyans than you'll believe, are very determined that in 2022 we should have a brand new, clean beginning. And indeed, the cup is full and overflowing. The injustices, the broken promises, the false new beginnings, the corruption, the smelling, stinking, rotten Kenya of today. Folks, the cup is full. And no Kenyan would want to imagine another false beginning. No Kenyan would want to imagine electing an idealistic new leader only to end up with same old, same old. Believe it or not, Jomo Kenyatta started out very determined to fight for a better Kenya, very determined to use his power to create a much better life for the vast majority of Kenyans. But something happened within the confined walls of State House. The second president of Kenya, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, aka Nyayo, had witnessed all the horrific injustices of his predecessor. Indeed, he had been one of the victims. And it took him a bit of time to settle down. Understandably so, when you realize what the circumstances were. But when he had settled down into office, he was also very determined to use his power to create a brand new, better Kenya. I know many of you will not believe me, but go back and do your own research. But then again, something happened within the walls of State House. Even before the 1982 attempted coup, that sealed the legacy of Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. I was in Kenya in 2003 when we dramatically voted out KANU from power. And we were all very convinced that we were now creating a brand new, very different, very prosperous Kenya. The Coca-Cola company then captured the mood of the country, very accurately, with a new campaign, titled "Change is in the Air." And in this campaign, the price of a bottle of Coca-Cola was reduced from 20 Kenya shillings to 15 Kenya shillings. I witnessed something that was just mind-boggling, which convinced me that indeed change had come to Kenya. Ordinary Kenyans were arresting. They were arresting traffic policemen for asking for bribes from matatu drivers, the drivers of matatus they were riding in. Citizen arrests were happening. Kenyans were talking very loudly. We have elected a new president. This is a new Kenya. Corruption, kwisha maneno. President Mwai Kibaki, who had also witnessed firsthand a lot of the mistakes of previous regimes, was very determined to create a brand new Kenya. Judging from his early actions, his list of promises to Kenyans must have been very close to him on his desk at State House. But alas, yet again, something happened within the walls of State House. In my view, based on very close analysis for a number of years, I am convinced beyond any doubt that the biggest problem with the Mwai Kibaki presidency is that despite many years in government, there were some critical things he did not know about the presidency. In my view, he greatly underestimated just how sick the patient called Kenya was. And those who are keen observers will have noted, sensed, the great disappointment in Mwai Kibaki as his presidency came to an end. When you get a new job, you imagine what you're going to achieve. You imagine what the place will look like after 5 years of you on your job. And you have minimum expectations. I don't think Mwai Kibaki achieved even 10% of his minimum expectations at the time he came into power. Not even 10%. David Murathe is in that unique position of where he knows what it feels like fighting for something, and also what it feels like frustrating those who are fighting for something. For our sakes, and for the sake of our children and grandchildren, the next president of Kenya had better fully understand just how critically sick Kenya is. Because there's no way you can create a plan that will work if you don't fully understand what the current situation really is. In other words, you must fully understand how something works before you can ever hope to make any successful adjustments. you can't find a certain spare part for your vehicle. So you decide to allow a mechanic to improvise with a very similar spare part from another vehicle. Very similar, but not the same, because a very tiny rubber ring is missing. Yeah, and you're not sure what this tiny rubber ring is there for. Yeah, you think maybe it was just put there for decoration or to make the spare part look better. Yeah, and the result of this improvisation can easily end up being tragic. In his attempt to get rid of corruption, Mwai Kibaki did not fully understand how corruption works in Kenya. He discovered very late that in Kenya, the government cannot work without corruption. It is a key part in the engine. And for that engine to run, if you want to remove this spare part called corruption, you need to replace it with something else that will work to keep that engine running. Otherwise, you'll be forced to put back the old part because you need the engine running before that vehicle can move anywhere. So, why do people change? In my view, it is because they don't understand enough about the engine, even as they are determined to make changes, which is an exercise in futility. For in much wisdom is much grief, the wisest man who ever lived said, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. It has pleased Almighty God for me to analyze politics in Kenya for very many years. And the more inside knowledge I've gained over the years on how Kenya really works, the more sorrow I have felt and the more overwhelmed I have felt. In the same way, Kenyans have had a very steep learning curve since the 2017 elections. They've had a steep learning curve on how Kenya really works. And if we all felt very overwhelmed by all these shocking things we learned about how our country really works, then we should have known that there was much more to come. Because in the year 2020, we all had a very steep learning curve on how things really work in this world. And so, it is very understandable that many Kenyans who know a lot have just given up. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. But we have a problem here, a very big problem. Giving up is not an option. If it was just you, maybe it would be an option. But remember, the children we have brought into this world willingly. The children we have brought into this country willingly. What will happen to them if we give up now? And there's another problem. Giving up will not make the problem go away. In 2004, I gave up and I walked away. My farewell post to politics and political analysis is still available on the Kumekucha blog. Check out 2014, I believe it was in October. I wanted to live an ordinary life, not looking over my shoulder all the time, not having to gauge the political climate all the time, not having to be so careful about everything I do. And nowadays I have to be even more careful because everybody knows my voice. A few months ago, I was talking to a pastor and his wife, and so I was not cautious. And they were introducing me to somebody. And as I was leaving, this other somebody that I just met said they wanted to have a word with me. And I could see they were very excited. And they said, I just want to confirm something. Yeah, I know your voice. I'm a big fan. Sio kumekucha, Chris? I am a very big fan. I have never missed any of your videos. And so in 2004, I wanted a new life. A brand new life of not being careful, of not taking precautions. Well, to cut a very long story short, what happened is that I was swallowed by a big whale. As I was trying to run away from this political life. And after some very uncomfortable, dark days in the belly of this big whale, it vomited me right back to the political life I was running away from. And amongst the many lessons I learned, in trying to run away from my situation in politics, was that giving up is not an option. Dear God Almighty, let the destiny of your beloved nation Kenya be fulfilled according to your perfect will. And give Kenyans the strength to know that giving up is not an option. Amen. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.